welcome to another random ramble. I've been spared these for so long, I thought it's time for another one. Having said that, this one isn't particularly random, it's rather specific. It's to do with the reopening of our church. As you know, this is happening at the moment in churches throughout the country. A gradual process, because there are so many rules and regulations that we have to comply with. And so I thought it might be useful to actually produce a little video that, as it were, tells you what to expect when you do come back to Saint Vincent's. Either, first of all, for times of private prayer, or then eventually for masses on weekdays, and finally, masses on Sundays. I'll tell you more about that later on. But first of all, even though I said this might not be that random, it will be a ramble, because I want to just wander around church and show you some of the changes, some of the things to expect, so that when you do come here, perhaps to pop in for prayer, you'll know what to expect and it won't come as too much of a surprise for you. So, if you'll come with me, we'll head out into the porch to look at what you'll first of all meet when you arrive here at St Vincent's. So the first thing that you will find when you arrive at St Vincent's is a steward. We've got 20 volunteers who are going to act as stewards. Part of the government rules for the reopening of churches is that you can't just open the church. There's got to be some official presence in the church at all times, at least 2 stewards. Now, our stewards are all parishioners who volunteered their time to be on duty, first of all, when the church is open for private prayer. Stewards are not some sort of COVID cops, as I've heard them referred to. They're there to help. They're there to welcome us to church and to make sure that everyone is safe. They're there to help us with our own safety and also to make sure of the safety of others. The invisible jobs that the stewards will be doing will be before anyone arrives at church. They'll be cleaning and sanitizing the church so that it's safe for use. And then after everyone's left and the church is locked again, they will be cleaning the church, ready for the next session. So I'd like to just at this point say a huge thank you to all of those people who have volunteered. They're going to have quite a lot to do, but thank you for that generosity of spirit where they've stepped up in order to allow our church to be open, because we couldn't do it without them. So, when you come to church for a prayer at one of our advertised sessions, our advertised slots, the first thing you'll meet will be a steward wearing a natty fluorescent vest and a little lanyard so that you know who they are. And they will make sure that you're aware of what is required. It may be that they may have to ask you to wait at the door. We are dealing with limited numbers in church. This might sound strange, we have such a big church, but as I'll explain later on, because of the rules about social distancing, the capacity of our church is hugely reduced. And so, it may be the case that if we reach that capacity, if church is full, the stewards may have to ask people to wait outside until someone leaves. The old one out, one in rule that you might have already experienced at shops and supermarkets. It's not likely that that will happen when the church is open for private prayer, but it might be an issue when we come to masses. But again, I'll talk about that later on as well. So please, let the stewards do their job. Please don't get too grumpy if they say, "I'm sorry, church is full at the moment, just have to wait a little while." We queue for so many other things, are we not willing perhaps to queue for a bit of time in church? So, be nice to the stewards, because their job is to keep us safe. So they will welcome you into church, and then it's their job to make sure that you are safe and also that others are safe. So the first thing that they will be doing is they will invite you to clean your hands. Let me turn the camera around and show you what we've got in the porch. So here, as you see, we have 2 nice, shiny, new hand sanitizing facilities. This is an alcohol gel, which is the recommended stuff for us to use. Everyone who comes into church, we would ask that you sanitize your hands. There's a very simple reason for this. Our hands that we use all the time to touch things, they can carry this infection, they can carry the coronavirus from place to place. And what these sanitizing stations will do will make sure that at least our hands are free from that. If we then go on to touch a bench, or if we're kneeling down and place our hands either on the side where we're sitting or on the kneeler in front of us. So sanitizing our hands is very important. These machines are automatic. All you actually have to do is to place a hand underneath the dispenser where it says please wash your hands, and you'll get a shot of alcohol gel. Also on these stands there are instructions for hand washing, but I'll show you over here exactly what that means. The idea of the alcohol gel is basically keep rubbing until your hands are dry. You shouldn't need to use any paper or anything else, and that way you know that they have been sanitised. Before we go into church, just one other note. You may have already noticed that the porch is very empty. There's none of the usual displays of literature or forms or brochures. Even the notice boards don't have the usual notices on, and you will see the piety stall has disappeared completely. This is part of the rules, that we don't want anything that causes people to congregate in one place. We do not want people crowding together to read notices or to browse the piety stall or anything like that. And also, we're not allowed to use hymn books or missals or anything like that. Any papers or resources that are to be used in church will be one use only. You will collect it yourself and then you will take it with you. So we're not sharing anything, we're not passing anything from one person to the other. So the idea is that we're not going to spend a long time in the porch. We'll come in, we'll sanitise our hands, and then the stewards will help us into church. Now when you come into church, one of the things that the stewards will do, and please don't take offence at this, is they will show you to a seat. It's not going to be a free-for-all. We have got quite severe restrictions on seating, so we want to make sure that people can safely get to a place. So please don't take offence if the stewards actually usher you, say, to the very front of the church. You may say, oh, I always sit on the back row. Please let the stewards help you to a place that they will know is safe for you. And also, and this is the point, perhaps for the people coming in after you, the last thing we want is people having to clamber over one another to get to places. So please let the stewards guide you to your place. In order to get to your place, we have actually instituted a one-way system in church, and there are some new markers on the floor to show you the way that you must travel. Again, this is practical. It's to avoid people bumping into each other or crossing each other's paths. So even when you're in church, if you move around, please do follow the one-way system. It's fairly obvious. I'll show you. As you may have noticed from that quick run around the church, apart from the fact that I've got a dog who can't read signs, is that some of our benches have been roped off. And you might have also noticed some little red and green stickers. This is because one of the most significant things that are going to have an impact on how we use church is the way in which we apply social distancing. Now, you'll have heard of this in lots of different contexts, perhaps most recently the announcement that social distancing can go down from 2 metres to 1 metre plus. However, in church, we are still sticking to 2 metres social distancing. This is a decision that's been made by the Bishops' Conference to apply to all churches. The alternative was 1 metre but with face masks and other forms of protection. And I think the bishops felt that that would be a very negative step, and it's actually easier to use the 2 metre distancing rule and not have to worry about face masks and things like that. However, 2 metres is a big space, And that's what's cut down the capacity of our church. So that's why every other bench is roped off, so we can only use alternate benches. And even on those benches, those little green markers show where people can sit 2 meters away from each other. Now, I have to confess, I was actually quite surprised when I came to measure out these spaces in church, just what a big space 2 meters is and how it severely limits our capacity. Of course, it's not just that you have to mark off every 2 meters, because every individual occupies a certain, shall we say, width. So you have to accommodate the width of a person and then the 2 meters before the width of a next person. And that's what's meant that, though this might be surprising, given how large our benches are, that most of them, the maximum number that you can fit on it, is 3 people, with that 2 meter distance between them. Here, let me show you. See what I mean? So, this is going to be something to be aware of. Now, for those times of private prayer, we're not predicting this being too much of a problem. Obviously, it is going to be a problem when we come to Mass, especially Sunday Mass. Now, I've not entirely thought through what we're going to do at the moment. I will publish things to the end of this week and in next week that perhaps will help us do that. Certain things I'm thinking of immediately. Obviously, the bishops have stated quite clearly there is still no Sunday obligation. So you do not have to come to Mass on a Sunday. 2 things that follow from that. First, any of you who are vulnerable or who are elderly or who are worried for any reason about the possibility of infection, you must not feel you have to come to Mass on Sunday. Certainly, if you are someone who has been shielding quite rigorously, has been protecting yourself from any contact with anyone else, please do not think of coming to church. You don't have to, so please don't take the risk. The second thing is to think that if there's no Sunday obligation but you want to come to Mass, perhaps you might want to use weekday Masses as well. Perhaps the thought immediately is, if you work during the week, obviously try and come on a Saturday night or a Sunday when we start those Masses again. If you don't work and you can come at any other time, perhaps use one of our weekday Masses. So think of the ways in which we can perhaps spread ourselves out more across all the Masses in a week rather than just the Sunday Masses. Also, those of you who perhaps are used to coming to weekday Mass every single day, perhaps you say, well, much as I'd like to, I'll only go 1 day a week to leave space perhaps for others. I don't know quite how we're going to do this. I certainly do not want to end up having an online booking scheme for you to get your seat in church, but we'll have to see where we go with this. So it's a case of watch this space. But do be aware that when you come to church, we will be limited in numbers. With the social distancing seating, as I've just shown you, the church can only accommodate 60 individuals. That's our maximum capacity, even for Sunday Mass. So, as I say, I'll try and think of the ways in which we can mitigate that, but you must be aware that if you turn up for Mass on a Saturday night or a Sunday morning and the church is full, then the stewards simply won't be able to let you in. It's not a matter of queuing until there's a gap. For the Mass, it will be full. Now, that might sound harsh. I'm not trying to sound harsh, but we have to work within these rules, within these constraints, these restrictions, in order to be able to open at all. And so we can't break those rules. We can't take can't take shortcuts with them. If we did, and it was found out, we could be subject to fines or even imprisonment. So please be aware of that. We have to abide by these rules while they are there. So please, if you do turn up for Mass and the stewards tell you that church is fun, please don't be cross with them or cross with me. We're only applying the rules that we have to apply. But as I say, we'll try and think about the ways in which we can try and spread our attendance out, not just at the Sunday Masses, but across the whole week. So, as I said before, when you come into church for Mass, please be aware that the stewards will help you find a place. We will fill up church from the front, again to avoid people having to cross over and cross each other's paths in order to keep people safe from the possibility of passing on any infection. So please do work with the stewards in order to make this possible. One note, households are not bound by the 2-metre social distancing rule. So if you come to Mass as a household, you will be able to sit next to each other, whether that's 2 of you or whether it's a family of 3, 4, 5, 6 or however many. You would be able to sit together. But obviously, where your family ends, then there will be another 2-metre gap until the next person from another household can actually occupy a bench. So if you are a household, please make sure that the stewards are aware of this. Don't expect them to work it out. Please make sure you tell them how many are in your household, in your party, so they can find, hopefully, a suitable seat for you in church. I'm sorry if this all sounds very faffy. It is going to take quite a lot of Christian charity and quite a bit of patience in order to make this work. Obviously, I mentioned the one-way system before. Once you've finished your time of prayer, in those moments when we're open for private prayer, or at the end of Mass on weekdays or on Sundays, you will not go out the way you came in. The back door there, the main door of the church, that's only an entrance in all of this. The one-way system then leads us all through church to the exit, which is the side door. So, whether it's praying on a weekday or at Mass, everyone who's leaving church will do so by this side door. As we come to this side door, there's another important piece of information I have to give you, which is that the toilets will not be available during this time of restrictions. So if you come to church, the toilet will be locked and will not be available. I only mention this so that everyone knows, so that you can, when you come to church, you can go before you come if you need to. Seriously though, if you do have a problem, which means that you may need the toilet, please consider that a reason not to come to church. We cannot guarantee the ability to clean those facilities after every use, which is why they pose a risk of infection, which is why the toilets will be closed off for those times when the church is open. So please do be aware of that. And if you're bringing your little ones to church, please make sure that they're aware of that too. At the porch there will be another hand sanitizing station, so that before you leave the church you can sanitize your hands once more. While here, just mention a couple of things that will be different when you come to Mass. Now, whether this is weekday Mass or Sunday Mass, they're pretty much going to be the same for the duration of this period of restrictions. The idea is that the Mass will be kept as short as possible. Oh, I just heard some sounds of cheering from elsewhere in the parish. No, the idea is that because this room, the church, is an enclosed space, it is safer for all of us if we spend as little time in here as possible when there's a large group of people. So when we have our 60 people in church for Mass, we don't want to be in here for an hour. And so the bishops have told us that Mass, especially on Sundays, is to be kept down to an absolute minimum. There are certain things that will not be taking place. There will be no collection. There will be a box somewhere in church that people can place donations in safely, though we are encouraging as many people as possible to do that online if you wish to. So there'll be no collection, there'll be no offertory procession, and communion will be very different. I'll explain that in a moment. We'll be omitting certain parts of the Mass to keep things short, and there will be no singing, no music and no hymns. There might be a little bit of recorded music at certain spots, but nothing that would add to the length of time or encourage the aerosol effect, infection being passed by people singing out nice and loudly. So Mass will feel slightly different when you come on a Sunday or a weekday. One of the biggest differences is going to be how we receive Holy Communion. The bishops have given us two choices, two options for this, and I've decided to go with what's called option 2. Communion will be given basically almost after Mass, so the very last thing that happens as you leave the church will be receiving Holy Communion. What will happen in the usual place of Holy Communion, before I receive myself, I will invite everyone to make the responses. The priest will hold up the host to the whole congregation and say, "The body of Christ," and then everyone will reply, "Amen," together. And the same, "The blood of Christ, Amen." The reason for this is so that when you actually come to receive communion, because you will be standing face to face with me, the idea is, again, to avoid infection, I'm not going to say anything to you, you're not going to say anything to me. So we'll make the responses all together. "The body of Christ, Amen." And then when it comes to communion, you will receive it without me saying anything, without you saying anything. The other thing is that communion, as I say, will be given at the very end of Mass. So what will happen is, when Mass comes to an end, the Mass is ended, go in peace, thanks be to God. Then the stewards will start, row by row, to invite people out. And remembering the one-way system, you will come out to this door where there will be a communion station here. There will be a table which I will stand at one side of it, and you will come to the other side to receive Holy Communion, just the sacred host, just in the hand, and then after receiving communion, make your way straight out of church, back to your car or back to head home. So this might sound rather strange, but it's a way of making sure that we are not running the risk of bumping into each other, of staying in church longer than we need to, of passing on any infection. So there will be instructions about this when you do come to Mass, but please be aware this is one of the biggest things that will be different. So we'll be receiving communion on our way out of church by this one exit. People may be asking about votive candles. There will be a system for lighting votive candles. One of the things we want to avoid is any contact, so we'll be looking perhaps at any offerings being placed in a box that you don't have to touch, so we avoid any physical contact at this point here. Similarly, what will happen is that the votive candles will all be laid out, ready to be lit. And the idea is that you will simply pick up your candle, and there will be another candle at the side of the votive candle stand. You light your candle from that without touching anything, to place your candle back on the stand. So this way, the only thing you touch is the votive candle that you are lighting. So I think that's more or less everything I needed to explain. I'm sorry if this all sounds a bit off-putting, a bit bureaucratic, a bit, this all sounds like a lot of fuss. Just remember two things. First of all, this is temporary. This is only until at some point in the future, I don't know when, it's not up to us to decide that, things do change to be much more back to normal. This is only temporary, and that's where the second point comes in. Why are we doing this? It is for safety, it is for protection. If you remember back before things closed down in March, we were running around doing everything as we would say as normal, but that virus was in the air. That's why we had to lock down. Now, sadly, that virus is still out there. We've heard just recently of various cases, the city of Leicester having to go into a second lockdown because of a spike in cases. We saw in the news some perhaps scare stories about Rochdale, Oldham and Barnsley, places where the infection rate was significantly higher than the national average. Coronavirus is still out there, and we are still trying to do the things that will mitigate or reduce the possibility of infection. That's why all these measures are here in church now. It would be dreadful if in the local papers, on the local news, the headline was, "Local Catholic Church causes spike in coronavirus." I don't want that to happen to us. So all of these arrangements might seem a little bit finicky, they might seem to be rather awkward, they might seem to be stopping us from doing what we feel we should be able to do. These are what we are doing in order to stay safe, in order to make sure that the church is a completely safe place for us to visit, to pray, for us to come to Mass. Yes, there are problems, especially problems with our capacity now and the numbers that normally come here. Watch this space, or at least watch the newsletter and the website for any more ideas or any more information about how we can manage that. But please, I ask all of you, do be generous in understanding and accepting these rather peculiar arrangements that we have to put up with at the moment. As I say, remember they are temporary, and remember what they're there for. They are there to make sure that Saint Vincent's does not cause anyone to become ill, does not cause this virus to infect anyone else. So, as I've been saying, it seems forever, since sometime in March, let's keep going. We've done so well so far. We've kept up our spirits, we've kept up our prayer, we've kept up our faith. Now that things are changing, we must accept that it's not going to be immediately back to normal. It's not going to be easy. There are still going to be problems that we have to face. And most importantly, I think, is that we still have to be thinking of each other. Not just thinking about me. I want to go to Mass. I want to receive communion. We have to be conscious of the fact that we're part of a community and we do need to share. And all of these arrangements, as well as keeping us safe, are hopefully a way in which we can continue to practice that Christian charity, that looking out for, looking after each other, which has been such a feature of these past 3.5 months. So, as I say, keep going, watch this space, and I do look forward to hearing the sound of your voices in this church for the first time in goodness knows how long. It will be wonderful when I say, the Lord be with you, to actually hear a response. So I'm looking forward to seeing us all back in church. And as I say, please be aware, we're not back to normal yet. We are getting there though. Just a little bit more patience, a little bit more charity as we continue on our journey. Thank you for watching, and as I say, look forward to seeing you here at some point safely in the not too distant future. God bless.